Mechanics of Reddit. What's the dumbest thing you've seen someone do to their vehicle? My old mechanic had a guy come in with a Ford Probe. He claimed it was low on oil. They take the dipstick out and the whole stick has oil on it. He checks again with the same result. The guy took the oil cap off and looked down into the hole and said, "See, it is low." He had put 3-4 cases of oil in the motor trying to fill the entire block up. The previous mechanic didn't know how to patch an exhaust leak and had tried to weld a Rockstar can around the leak. The leak caused the second oxygen bank to fail, which is why they tried to patch it with the can. Not a week later the bank read a failure again. You don't weld it on, you use some sealant and a couple of Jubilee clips. This probably won't be the worst one in this thread. I used to know a 30-year-old who would put the car air freshener duct taped outside the exhaust, kind of just dangling in front of the opening. His logic was it makes the exhaust smell better for pedestrians. That's oddly sweet. Had a customer once who had their oil light come on and couldn't figure out how to top the oil up. He thought it might have worked like his boat motor, so he poured a jug of oil in his fuel tank. Not a mechanic, but former service writer. Woman comes in for an oil change. Some common minivan. Nothing out of the ordinary. Walked by the van while it was up on the rack and noticed one of the tires was nearly bald in the middle. Cords showing. Textbook overinflation. I checked the tire pressure. Was well overinflated. Then looked around the vehicle. 2 more tires were in exactly the same state. Overinflated and showing damage from it. The 4th was a bit underinflated. No glaringly obvious tread wear. Pointed it out to the customer when she came back. Asked if there's any reason 3 tires would be overinflated. Long story short, she was occasionally seeing a low tire light on the dash. No indication of which tire, just low tire. Told her husband, and he just aired up all 4 tires. Happened again, fixed the same way, rinse and repeat. So over time they kept the tire with the leak going, but managed to ruin the other 3. Buy a tire pressure gauge if your car doesn't give you tire pressure readings. I wrench on bikes, not cars, and at least once a month we have someone come in that put chain lube or grease on their brake rotors because they were squealing, and now wants to know why their brakes aren't grabbing. Completely fill their engine with oil and wonder why it's smoking and then locked up. My mom filled the oil fill with water when the car was overheating. She said that she knew it said oil but she didn't know where else to put the water. The list is long. Removing PCV hose, assorted vacuum lines, O2 sensor, etc, thinking they are going to get better performance. Cutting a wire under the dash to hook up a stereo. Then bringing the car to me to fix the tail lights. Pouring 3 quarts of oil in but the dipstick still shows low because they put the oil in the radiator. Putting gasoline in a diesel truck. Again. That again just tops it all off. You would think people learn, but sometimes not, and those stories can make the best jokes. I bought my car off a guy for $785. For all intents and purposes it worked fine, but the guy said that it overheated almost daily. 1999 Nissan Sentra, manual, 135k miles. If it didn't overheat it would have been closer to $3 4k, maybe even more. I bought it anyways, cause I could try fixing it and cause I was desperate for a car. My old one died and I live 10 miles from work. So I brought the car home. The guy filled the radiator per an agreement we made, and the overflow tank was already empty. I started feeling along the coolant piping, and when I came to the thermostat sensor housing I could stick my fingernail inside the gap. My fingers came out soaking wet with coolant. Went to a parts store, spent $10 on a housing gasket, $3 on some liquid gasket, and $50 on new oil, a new oil filter, a new air filter, radiator cleaner, and coolant. Spent an entire day putting that gasket in. The reason it took so long is a frickin' story and a half that was all about Murphy's Law. Changed the oil, cleaned out the radiator, and I haven't had any trouble since. All in all, a perfectly working car for about $850. I kinda feel bad for the dude who sold it to me. Did a co-op at a shop back in high school. Guy complains about how his car doesn't sit straight. We pull it in and don't even need to put it on the lift to realize that he has 17-inch rims on one side and 15s on the other. Took me about 45 minutes of explaining to him why cars aren't made like that before he told us that he'd be taking his business elsewhere. On a side note, the side with the 15s were 100% bald, like racing slick bald, and everything in that car was falling to pieces. I have too many stories of crap I found in people's cars there, but this one has to be my favorite. Worked as a car cleaner at a dealership one summer in high school. Guy towed in a relatively new, top of the line Corvette he had bought there sometime before I started. He was peeved that it had died on the road and been running like crap before that, ranting and raving about he spent all this money and it only went X months years before completely breaking down. One of my work buddies got it up on a lift and started looking it over. He opens the oil drain plug and nothing comes out. He pulls apart the engine and the oil could now be best described as glue. Owner talks to the guy and asks when the last time he changed the oil was. Guy had zero idea what he was talking about. He had no idea that you had to do that. He assumed you just added gas and that's the only thing you needed to do. The engine was a complete loss, which meant the car was a complete loss to him. If there's one thing I can take away from this post, it's that it's pretty astonishing how many people don't know or care to get their oil changed. Not a mechanic. Some years ago, here where I live there was a fairly widespread craze of mixing oil. I don't remember the type, but it wasn't at all related with the engine, like sunflower oil or something like that, with diesel for better fuel consumption. The thought was that this type of oil would burn anyway, and mixed with diesel it would give the same kilometers for less money. Of course it wasn't the brightest of ideas, so I remember that despite being fairly young, I remember strongly advising against this practice. My mother didn't listen to me, and proceeded to top her Mitsubishi Pajero Turbo. Great car for fuel economy, I know, with whatever oil she used. Now, to be fair, the car held up pretty well despite the abuse, which it's because it was a tank. However, it eventually succumbed. If I remember correctly, the fuel pump completely failed and had to be replaced entirely, but I might be forgetting stuff. The funny thing is though that the mechanic, after looking at the engine for about 3 minutes or something like that, asked almost angrily to my mother if she was using the oil. When questioned how he knew that, he said something along the line of, "It's the fourth this week that comes in with this issue." I had a guy bring his motor swapped late 80s F150 in for some transmission work. These came factory with either a 300 straight 6, 351 V8, or 460 V8. He put 2.3 liters carbureted 4-cylinder out of an old Ranger in it. The reasoning behind the swap was that it had improved fuel mileage at the cost of some speed. The thing could barely move under its own power. If you floored it, it would top out at about 55 miles per hour, wide open, and take a good minute or two to get there. Had a guy show up at a tire shop bragging about being blackout drunk and needed his tire changed. He had his spare on with 3-stroke 5 lug nuts. He had tightened them by hand and they backed off. Had to replace all the studs. Folks would come in asking for tire repairs, patches, on tires that were literally cut in half. Like you drove on the rim for a week split down the middle in half. They'd get so offended when I explained they not only needed a tire, but now a rim as well. I've seen a fake intercooler on a Sunfire, paper mache used instead of Bondo. The list goes on. Not a car mechanic, but I knew a guy who used self-tapping screws to fasten a roof rack to his car. Must have run out of duct tape. Not a mechanic, but a car enthusiast. Saw a couple of cars where owners didn't know what basic maintenance was. Like no oil change, no brake pad change. The oil turned into jelly and you had to scrape it out. The most ridiculous thing were the brakes. My mechanic friend showed me the brakes of an elderly lady's car. The brake discs were gone, like almost completely wiped down to like 5-6 mm. She said to him, "The car feels weird while I brake." If that sweet little old lady wants to drive around like that, nothing's going to stop her. Lady stated that her car said low coolant, so she filled up the coolant. She made it about a mile and the car started running terrible and cut off. Shop rollback picked it up. She filled up the coolant by removing the oil cap and topping the motor off with water. Let me tell you about Diamond Plate Guy and Focus Bro. Diamond Plate Guy had two things he used to modify his truck: a drill and a ton of diamond plate. It was an absolute base model V6 Ram 1500 with the exhaust chopped off, which I thought was bad enough until I opened the hood. He had drilled or glued diamond plates to every flat surface, air filter box, intake manifold, fan shroud, etc. This was 18 months ago. My eyes still haven't recovered, but this isn't the end. He had some crappy wheels that he had painted white himself. I know this because he painted the inside of the wheel where it seats to the hub, which caused them to seize to said hubs. I literally had to buy a bigger hammer to smack them off. Focus bro. Guy had a custom straight pipe, full Sparko race seats, 5-point racing harnesses, lowering springs, and a base model, automatic Ford Focus SE. I bet Focus bro would slip it into neutral at stoplights so he could take his foot off the brake and let it roll back, giving the illusion on a manual to unsuspecting motorists. Not a mechanic, but we do almost all of our farm equipment maintenance. Brother called during a hellacious snowstorm telling me hurry get over here and bring beer. I arrive with Bud Lights in hand. He's got 2 lawn chairs under his carport. We get a beer and settled in our chairs out of the snow. We commence to watching his methed out neighbors that are higher than kites push this Mustang. They're trying to push start it. After about 10 minutes we're hysterical. They had been trying for almost 2 hours. It was an automatic transmission. You need to send an invite out to the rest of us next time. I'll bring the snacks. Not a mechanic, but while sitting in the shop waiting for my own car to have work completed, I witnessed a customer and their mechanic talking about the customer's car needing suspension repair. The customer had tried, unsuccessfully, to do the repair himself. The mechanic asked him why some lug nuts were missing and others were loose. The customer replied how he thought he would be helping the mechanic by loosening the tire for him. The customer had driven 20 minutes to get to the shop with the tire held on by a few loose lug nuts. Dude spending thousands of dollars modifying their pickup for off-roading, even though they spend 99.99% of the time on highways and the furthest off of a road they ever get is a logging road that a stock Forester could tackle with no problems, and then complain about extra crappy fuel mileage and having to pay for new 35-inch knobby tires that only last 10k miles because they wear out super quickly if you drive mostly on pavement, and having to replace their front wheel bearings every other year because those larger wheels and tires are a lot heavier than the stock ones, and being super surprised to learn that parts for a 3-stroke 4-ton pickup can cost multiple times more than the comparable ones for the small sedan they sold to afford their bro truck. Service advisor here. Hope it's okay I post this. Had this happen a few months ago. It's a copy and paste from my FB where I typically post stories like this. Customer brings in car last week Wednesday with shaking issue. Cool. Take care of some of the issues the car actually has. Leaves 10 times better. Issues include bad axles, TSB on diff, dirty transmission fluid, blown rear shocks, needing oil service. Done and gone. We listed the recommendations still required but customer declined. Only did axle and diff fluid service. Today. Same customer. Over the phone. Customer, what in fucking heck did you do to my car? Me, what's the issue? Customer, the issue is back, and it's fucking 1000x worst. What the heck did I pay you for? Me, okay, well if it is our repair that caused the problem we are more than willing to see what's going on. We didn't replicate anything after test drive, so unfortunately we can't determine it's the same issue without checking it out. Customer, I demand a tow truck to be sent out and you guys have to flip the bill on this. I'm not paying for this nonsense. Me, sir, not a problem. If it is work we've done we are happy to pay for the tow and correct the issues. But be advised, if the issue is due to the other recommendations or new issue, you will be responsible for the tow fee. Customer, yeah that's fine. I know it's what you guys did anyway. Me, okie dokes. Tow truck will be there within the HR. Tow truck picks car up, notices issue, tells customer, notes it on receipt. Customer signs and acknowledges it, coming back to this in a second. Get car, puncture on rear right outer tire sidewall, nice welt and gash the size of a penny, tire completely deflated. Tow driver noted this, told customer and wrote it out and had customer sign it. Grab air hose, hook up to tire, just wheezing air out. Me, well then. Me, yes sir, you had a flat tire and you were driving on it. Customer, nope, not possible, it left here fine, and I barely drove it home and it sat since I picked it up from you guys. Me, According to the receipt, you acknowledge the puncture with the tow truck driver and sign it off knowing it was flat. But we did install the spare, drove about 10 miles on street and FWI, and we cannot replicate the issue at this time. Can hear customer trying to find receipt. Hangs up. Guess who just paid $75.00 on a tow bill? Mechanic here. Lots of stories. One guy has OCD and got a license plate called too clean. Only let one guy in our shop touch his base model Dodge Dakota 2007. Had to double up on gloves and he would watch. Undersprayed his car with chrome spray. I work primarily on equipment. Operator calls us out to his machine saying he had a crack on his boom. Think the first arm on a large excavator. I get out there and the whole boom has broken off and is on the ground. My favorite though had to be the operator who blew a hydraulic hose in a forestry setting. Maybe $200 to change the hose. Decided he wants to walk the machine out to make the hose easier and runs the machine out of oil. Blowing up the hydraulic pumps. $26,000. 2 travel motors. $8,000 each. And the auxiliary pump. $2,500-ish. The machine was down for 2 months for him deciding to walk an extra 50 meters out of the bush so he didn't have to walk the extra distance. I have tons of stories about lazy operators but this is probably the laziest lol. Bad snow day. For whatever frick reason we were open. Guy pulls up needing a flat repair. He pulled up in a way the car could be just pulled in. Co-worker goes to pull it in and can't stop. Slams into his box. Wasn't going fast enough to damage anything. Car had 0 brakes. Say something to the customer, oh the foot brake? That hasn't worked in years. You have to use the hand brake. We inspect the vehicle and discover it doesn't even have brake calipers in the front. With the hoses clamped off and not an ounce of brake fluid in the master cylinder. And the most surprising part, they didn't want to get the brake repairs done. Guy was convinced his tires were different sizes because they're rotating at different rates. Like, he jacked up each wheel and put the valve stem at the top. Went for a drive, and they were not lined up anymore. I had to explain it with chalk and string in the parking lot. A customer brought their vehicle to the dealership I used to work for an airbag recall. They had bedazzled everything on the interior dash, including the covers for the airbags on the steering wheel and on the passenger side. I'm not sure she understands the fact that airbags have enough power to turn anything into shrapnel. At least they'd look fabulous when they show up to the morgue. I worked at a Chevy dealer and now work at a Jaguar Land Rover dealer. I'm not surprised at people's stupidity anymore. More than once I've seen people add oil to the coolant reservoir. I've seen the inside of a motor where the customer never changed the oil since it was new and the car had 50xxx miles on it. The dumbest thing I see every day is people come in with broke suspension parts, bald tires and no brakes. They don't buy any of it and just want the oil change and insist we are trying to rip them off. But the same person will come in raising heck over a small safety recall and refuse to leave until it's done because the car's unsafe. Lady had a brand new at the time Subaru and was complaining about horrible gas mileage. People complain about gas mileage all the time and it's usually because of driving habits. I get the car in and it looked like she hit something in the road and ripped a big hole in the gas tank and all the fuel she put in poured right out onto the pavement. It was in fact a valid poor fuel economy complaint after all. Suru many people hammer on battery terminal ends. The types of terminals have changed with modern vehicles, but people still don't understand that batteries are lead and plastic. Don't beat and hammer on that crap. You will destroy your brand new $100 plus batteries. And no, there is no warranty if you smash it with a dang hammer. My dad once poured wiper fluid into where the brake fluid goes. It was my relatively new car so he wasn't familiar with it and also clearly not paying attention. He tried to tell me it was probably fine but I made him take it to a mechanic and pay to have it drained and fixed properly. I bet the mechanic had a good laugh that day. And my dad learned a fairly costly lesson about paying attention. Knew someone who sorta did the opposite. Put antifreeze in the windshield wiper fluid reservoir. Their reasoning: antifreeze doesn't freeze so if I use it in the winter the windshield won't ice up. It was brutal. She didn't actually do anything, but a girl at my school noticed her check engine light came on, and she wasn't sure what to do so she started asking around. Teacher told her to take it to a mechanic and have them look at the engine. She goes, okay, Where's the engine? Without missing a beat, teacher responds. That compartment in front of the passenger seat that opens up. Glove compartment. Really? The whole thing ended with a class trip outside to her car where the teacher opened the hood to show her the engine. She asks which thing in there is the engine. My poor teacher used to work on classic cars, and I'm very sure he wanted to die. My poor teacher used to work on classic cars, and I'm very sure he wanted to die. I too want to die from just reading this. I don't know much about cars, but this is a whole new level of not knowing how cars work. You have been visited by the comfortable garlic bread of good back support. Subscribe to Updoot Reddit in 3 weeks or never sit comfortably again. You have a lot of time for this one. I understand if you're busy, no rush. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.